I want to give away some true guidance that is literally going to help you live your very best life, be your very best self, and just understand what is true. Because we've been talking a fair bit lately about truth and understanding that truth sets you free, solves all your problems. Now, to get there, you kind of need some level of guidance. And something that needs to be let go of is something that our society, our civilization places a huge value in. And if we can remove value from that, then we can actually start to move forward. And that thing that our society places a huge value in is skepticism. And I think you only need to look at this new digital age that we're in and the amount of information that's out there and people really just not knowing what is true. People not trusting the news anymore, people literally looking at the amount of misinformation that's out there, people having terms like fake news, and people see skepticism as a virtue. Now, if you're going to use skepticism as your guide to finding truth, you're fundamentally blocking yourself from ever finding truth because truth can never unfold from skepticism. So skepticism pretty much sits itself on the fence and it never commits to faith. It never commits to reason, never commits to higher reason. It literally just says no and shakes its head at things until we can find something that feels less negative or less jarring or less resistance. Now, we need to understand what we're looking at because when you're using skepticism as your guide, you need to understand what the guide actually is. And to understand that, you need to understand perception, need to understand the belief system. So it's your perception which is wholly inaccurate and limited because your perception is really, really limited. It's very partial. You can only perceive within a certain perceptual range. And that perceptual range can only ever give you just a tiny fragment of all the information that's involved in any situation. Now, you've only got to look at the visual system to understand that the visible spectrum of light accounts for about 1%. So you're seeing 1% of what's going on, and you are 100% convinced that whatever you see, you'll believe. Whatever you see is true. Seeing is believing. That's the saying. And you can't not believe what you see, but you're literally only seeing 1%. 1% of what's out there, and you're convinced you've got it all figured out. The entire universe exists in oneness. And so the only way you could get meaning of any moment in your life, this moment included, would be if you could actually perceive the entire whole of all the information in the universe and everything that was going on in this moment right now. If you were somehow able to see that and understand that, well, then you would be able to look at this teeny tiny little piece, this little moment that you're in, because the whole gives meaning to the part. The part cannot give meaning to the whole. You cannot understand the whole, the entirety. You cannot actually understand true meaning just by looking at a piece, just by looking at a fragment. So we need to understand that, and then we need to understand that we need to remove value from our own perceptual experiences of life, what we've perceived, the meaning that we've given to things, and what we believe is our opinion. Our opinions, when we hold them up against what is true, don't add anything to what is true. You and I do not contribute via our perception, via what we've assigned and given meaning to and told ourselves is true. You and I do not contribute anything to eternally perfect universal truth. Whatever the truth is in the universe, whatever the eternal perfect truth in the universe actually is, it just is. It doesn't change. It's eternal. You and I thinking we're going through life and just figuring out one or two things and building our own opinions, we don't add anything to universal eternal truth. So if we hold a value on our own opinion and we believe that we've got something to add, and when truth comes to us, we literally look at that feeling skeptical and saying, no, wait a minute, it's not quite what I've figured out. I think I've got something here to add truth. Like, just listen, just hear me out on this. That's literally going to keep us stuck, because as soon as any distortion is a change, and as soon as we try and change universal eternal perfect truth, well, it's no longer universal, eternal, and perfect. We've just changed it. It's now something else. So as soon as you try and change something that is true with your opinion or something you think you've got to add, that truth is lost. It's now gone. It's now something else. You've reduced truth to just mere perception, which is merely just a way of seeing things. And we want to get past that. We want to get to truth, because that's truth sets you free, solves all your problems. So we need to understand that perception is really limited. You're only ever perceiving just a fragment of the whole. You're only just perceiving tiny little fragments of information. And that perception is formed by your belief system. Your belief system makes the perception. And if you're looking to try and get to truth, well, for you to find truth, we can't sit here and just talk about it. I can give you an awareness of things to look out for and an awareness of a path to follow and maybe some information that you can literally use in your own life to help find that. But fundamentally, you need to experience that. If you want to come and do healing work, we can go do healing work and you can actually experience that. But you need to experience it one way or another. It doesn't come from just having it detailed or explained to you. Now, for you to experience, you're going to experience via your own perception. That's how you have your experiences, via your perception. So for you to be able to experience truth, you would first need to be able to have the perception that would actually allow you to perceive that. That would mean that you would need to have the belief system that has made that specific perception that is going to allow you to perceive and then experience truth. So it's for that reason that truth is only found via actually having a belief in its existence first. Having a belief in the existence of something without any proof of it would mean faith. So you need to have a level of faith to be able to find truth. And that's the thing. Faith and truth are always found. They always go hand in hand. They're always found together. So you would need to meet the conditions for truth. You can't find truth without meeting the conditions for truth, and that would be holding a faith in it, holding faith in truth. Again, do that in healing. We can literally go straight to it. If you're doing that on your own, well, then there may be a few more steps down the path to finding that first. But you have to meet the conditions. You're going to be far better placed to put your faith in something rather than your own skepticism. So we want to look at what that skepticism is, because when you understand what you're actually doing when you're using skepticism as your guide, really what you've done is you've gone through life perceiving all of your experiences, and then you have emotions based on what you've perceived, and those emotions can feel really strong. They might feel really good, they might feel really bad, but whatever you feel, you typically tend to look at that and then you think, oh, I've looked at this, I've looked at the situation, it felt really, really bad, it was quite a traumatic experience, and I looked around, there was nothing good in my emotions or anywhere in my awareness, so that was definitely a bad situation. Again, you were only perceiving just a fragment of the total information in that moment, and you were feeling emotions based on on your interpretation of that teeny tiny fragment. Then you go and assign meaning by saying that was a bad situation. Now you tell yourself that's true. So that's assigning your own truth to your perception. Then you store that to memory and you accumulate all that information that you believe that you need to be able to go through and just do life. You accumulate information so that you can think, so you can figure out how to do life and just be in the world and just exist. What you're doing is you're essentially perceiving a situation. So when you're being skeptical, you're perceiving a situation, you're perceiving information, and you're trying to work out if that's true and you feel skeptical about it. What you're doing is you're going within and you're looking at all the past meaning that you have applied, which is also untrue, and you're holding up your perception of this situation or this information, which is perceived by a limited and inaccurate perception, and then you're looking at what you've figured out through life, what you've assigned meaning to, which is also via limited and inaccurate perception, so neither of which is true, and you're just trying to work out, does this feel like it fits with what I've understood before, or is that giving me some resistance? And where we feel less resistance, or where we just feel like it's less jarring, then we're typically happy to sort of let that in and explore that a little bit more, or open up a little bit more to that, because it just feels less jarring, less resistant. Essentially, we're not looking at truth. Now, the skepticism is incredibly important to the lower level of mind. The ego itself, the ego maintains fear, maintains guilt, shame, lower self-esteem, self-loathing, attack, hurt, anger, frustration, depression, anxiety. The ego maintains all of those things. Skepticism is incredibly important to the ego, because the ego knows that you can absolutely never get to truth if you maintain skepticism, because you're never meeting the conditions for truth. The ego wants to keep you away from truth because the ego knows that it is an illusion, and if you hold an illusion up in the light of truth, it literally dissolves. So you'll dissolve the illusion if you progress your way towards truth, and the ego certainly doesn't want that. It just wants continuity, wants to continue. So you need to try and meet the conditions for truth, which would be holding faith in something, rather than skepticism, which is to sit on the fence and have no faith or not apply reason. So you would be far better placed to hold faith in some ethical teacher, or some model of human goodness, or to hold faith in spiritual teachings, or a spiritual teacher, or if you're religious, in a saint of some kind. To hold faith in something you believe that you can trust and you can give your faith to, that's just not going to steer you wrong. So you can work out what feels right for you, but holding some level of faith in that can steer you down that path, and you can begin to have an awareness of truth, which will eventually be found within. That truth exists in you, and eventually you can open up to it, and you can develop absolutely the intuitive process and the understanding of truth and going within. You can begin to know that. So begin by meeting the conditions for truth, which is holding faith. Hold faith in something. You'll be far better off than just being skeptical. And as you go down that path, you can build the perception, build the intuitive process that can take you to truth, which will set you free, literally solve all your problems, take you to your very best self and your very best life.